Hey everyone, my name is Beth Wong. I am the Director of Agile Coaching and Training at LitheSpeed. Have been working with them for almost 3 years now, but have about 11 years in the Agile coaching and training space. I started my career out as a project manager turned Scrum Master, turned Agile coach and trainer. So have quite a bit of examples and things to talk about today in the webinar. So I think that'll be great. So let's get started. So I wanted to roll through the course agenda with everyone, and first wanted to hit on why this particular topic. So I'll go into kind of what struck me as interesting about this. We'll have a section for a little bit of a Q&A, so you guys will get an opportunity to fill out a poll and also ask questions for specific responses that I should be able to give you at the end of the webinar. And then a couple of things that I really wanted to touch on about specifically what I've heard from Agile coaches before or seen are things like a big bang versus a pilot approach. So we'll speak more to that in just a second. Also, a comment of you should be delivering in 2-week sprints. So we'll talk about that. And then also Agile is used only in software development, not. So the fact that that's not true, and we'll talk through that. And then, of course, at the end, again, I'll have opportunities to answer specific questions that you might have, and also around specific topics that we're providing. All right, so kind of why this topic. So I used to be a Scrum Master in a former life, and remember when I worked for a larger organization, and once we kicked off our Agile transformation, I was a part of an initial pilot team there, and had several Agile coaches come in and work with us from many different companies, and we kind of kicked things off and started really getting into moving to the mechanics of Scrum, and kind of setting up our team and how our team operates and all those kinds of things. But what I never really understood was the why that all of that was occurring. And so I think it's really important if you have an Agile coach or are working with an Agile coach that he or she explains the why that we do all of these things, right? And it's not just the sake of doing it to do it and to check off boxes that say that we're doing specific mechanics of Scrum or things like that. But understanding why we do these things and why we're making this change as an organization is really important and really helps folks to get to understand the importance of these activities. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things over on the left-hand side that a lot of times we spend a lot of effort and money as well to build things out, and a lot of times those things never get used. So how do we change that? I think Agile methods do introduce a lot of feedback into the process of when you're developing a product, whether it's software or whether it's curriculum or whether it's an HR process or things like that. But we need to build in feedback loops all along the way and get feedback early and often, because so we don't have this situation that you see on the left-hand side where a lot of features we developed hardly ever get used. I also thought it was really important to understand, what was different about waterfall versus Agile methods, and it's really kind of what both of those methods value is success. So typically in an old traditional approach of delivery, the things that are valued are we on schedule? How's scope? Are we maintaining our scope? And also, are we on budget? So it's really success is measured on how we adhere to a plan that's focused on those 3 areas. And then I started to understand more of why, in Agile methods, we are actually valuing, quality and just value itself. And And those are the things that we actually see as success. And so as I kept moving through my Agile journey, I really started to understand these things and kind of wish that I had had that before when I first kicked off my career as a Scrum Master. So that was very helpful. Okay, so we're going to take a poll. I think Stephanie's going to help us kick off a poll that you guys should see coming up soon. And also, if there are, so there's the poll that's there. So please feel free to fill that out. If there's an area that you're interested in, we will come back to it later and talk specifically about that. If you have another question, you can select that particular option and then use the questions feature on the right-hand side of your control panel to type in a question that we'll answer later.
I'll give you guys just a couple more seconds to get those votes in. And definitely let us know if you have anything else that you want to address. Okay, here you go.
All righty. And Steph, will that pop back up at the end so we can reference that again?
I can certainly feed that to you, yep.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay. So we'll move back to those a little bit later. So I once heard an Agile coach say that we should just rip the Band-Aid off and transform the entire organization at once. So through my experience working with a lot of organizations and starting the process of an Agile transformation, I have found that it's oftentimes better to run a pilot first so that you can get information about how that went well, what didn't work, specifically things within, cultural challenges that you may have faced or leadership and management roadblocks that you may have faced or run into. But I really think it's a good idea to start in a specific targeted area, kind of get some teams up and running, see what works, what doesn't work, and essentially you're running an experiment and you're trying to get feedback on that experiment. So I think that it's a great way to learn some lessons and then make adjustments and tweak your approach when you move on to a different area of an organization. I think that it's also a great idea too that in this process that it's best to identify someone in the particular group that you're starting with that may be a great Agile advocate, somebody that you think may be a great coach at some point, may make a great Scrum Master, but it's always good to kind of create those relationships and enhance people's Agile skill sets in those areas, and especially particularly in the pilot area, that can also then help transform other areas of the organization later internally once the Agile coaches have left. So also, I once heard an Agile coach say, you should be delivering in 2-week sprints. And I never really understood why, actually, until I started doing things and started understanding more concepts around Scrum particularly. But I have worked with a lot of clients who have said, well, we have 3-week sprints or we have 4-week sprints because that's how long it takes us to get work done. And I think that the value of having shorter sprints, 2 weeks is kind of what Scrum recommends, is really, again, to get feedback early and often. So maybe there's some things that are preventing us from being able to get some work completed in a couple of weeks, and your Agile coach should help you kind of identify what those things are. Is it that we're still continuing to do a lot of manual testing? Do we need to automate some things? Are there long handoffs that are happening? But your Agile coach should take a look at that and help you identify how you do get to 2-week sprints, because it's really valuable to be able to create something that you can then get feedback on and make the right adjustments so that you can, change your approach in the next couple of weeks. Sometimes if you wait a month to get specific feedback, it's definitely harder to make changes, and oftentimes it's more expensive. I once heard an Agile coach say that Agile is only used in software development, and that's not necessarily true. There are a lot of Agile methods that are now being applied in lots of different organizations that are not developing software, or within large organizations in their groups, like in legal departments and things like that. But just wanted to highlight a couple of things that LitheSpeed has done in the non-software development space. We have and are currently working with Fairfax County Public School Systems to help them develop their curriculum for the upcoming school year. So we have had a couple of coaches work with their principal and other Agile advocates internally to use Scrum and use the process of Scrum to develop their curriculum, figure out how they're going to roll out specific things to different schools in their school systems and things like that. And also, LitheSpeed works with Capital One, has not only worked with them in their software development groups, but is now currently working in their marketing department. One of our co-founders, Arlen Bankston, is doing some coaching there and working with some marketing executives and management to introduce Scrum and some lean processes and concepts into their marketing delivery pipeline. And then also internally at LitheSpeed, we use a lot of Agile methods, lean methods, to manage some of our work that we do. So to help us see a visualization of all of the trainings that we're doing, all of the coaching engagements, all of the webinars that we're hosting, and applying WIP limits to a lot of those things. So our operations department uses Kanban and a lot of lean concepts. Our training department does as well, and also our Agile coaching and training practice that we have. Wanted to also point out that we have recently hosted, back in May, we hosted a Lean Agile DC conference, which the focus was on Agile being applied in non-software development spaces. And wanted to highlight that we have an interview series with some of the speakers there on YouTube, which I'll click on here. Well, not that. Wow. It's this. And Stephanie, do you want to speak to this a little bit, since you hosted the majority of these interviews?
Yeah, definitely. So like Beth said, our theme for this conference was Agile outside IT, and that's been a huge topic in Agile that we've seen throughout the year. It's just this shift from, solely a software methodology into kind of HR and marketing and sales and finance, like we've seen in education and definitely other sectors as well. So I sat down with a couple of our speakers from the conference. Jim Good is from Capital One. He kind of talked to us about their entire Agile transformation outside of software. Layla Rao gave a great presentation with Seda Goff on using improv, which typically is thought of as an acting method, to different Agile concepts that you can use throughout your teams. We sat down with FCPS and kind of seeing how they've been able to implement Agile and lean methodologies to every facet of their planning. Bart Vanderhagen founded a company called Pactify and is using kind of engagement and experimentation and feedback to run the entire business. So he's trying to apply Agile and Lean concepts on literally every single level. And it was very nice to be able to get more of a personal view into how all of these different people are applying Agile methods in, the back office operations type of fields. And like Beth said, we use it in our own operations, specifically the Kanban boards and daily stand-ups, and just using that as a visualization tool to help us prioritize and get things to market as soon as we can.
Great, thanks, Steph. All right, so let's have the opportunity to answer some of the questions that you guys either voted on or have written in.
I'll go ahead and share those results for you.
Great. All right, so it looks like the number one question is how would I get our leaders on board with Agile? So we'll start with that. So I think that you definitely have to typically try something at the team level and kind of get some things going and try to, show that there's some things that are working so that you actually have some evidence that, hey, this is actually some good stuff that's happening. And it actually can give you some, some metrics that you can try to track things with to talk to your leadership about how this has actually helped. So one thing that you could try is within your team, perhaps try to set up some sort of Kanban board with your work, and also tracking what we call, cycle time, or basically how long does it take work to come through my system on my Kanban board, and how you can improve your cycle time or make it better is by applying some things called WIP limits, which is work in process limits. And seeing how perhaps lowering your WIP limits can actually lower some of your cycle time. So trying some of those experiments and getting some of that data from that can be a good start to use that information with a conversation with management and leadership. Another thing that I think is really critical is also training that's specifically geared towards management and leadership to also help them understand, why would we make some sort of switch and change the way that we get work done when we've been doing it this way forever. What is this now going to give me? And so LitheSpeed offers a number of trainings for middle management and also senior executives, which I'll actually talk more about our Agile Leadership Academy in a little while towards the end of this webinar. But I think it's really important to try to get your management and leadership to take some sort of training so they get the why behind all of these things. So it looks like our next most popular question is, how often should my coach work with my team? So back when I worked for a larger organization and I was on a Scrum team, excuse me, we only had, I think it was 2 Agile coaches working with a number of teams at once. And that posed, kind of a problem because there were so many teams and only 2 coaches that we would have a coach kind of come by for maybe an hour at a time or 2 hours a week, and it really didn't do us a lot of good. We would listen to what he would say and very much value what he had to say, but then he wasn't able to spend a bunch of time with us to actually try to tweak the process that he had introduced and make it better and make it work for us. So I definitely think that if you're in an organization thinking about bringing in some coaching, or you already have a coach, if it's possible, you'd have a coach maybe working with like 2 to 3 teams at a time is very much the maximum, I think, from at least my experience in working with coaches, or excuse me, working with teams. So that way they can actually spend a lot of time with you in working through your team's, sprints, and actually working through a couple of sprint cycles with you. And then it's really important too that coach kind of works with a Scrum Master or identifies somebody, kind of as a partner or buddy to shadow with, so that he or she is transferring some of their Agile coaching skills to a specific person on the team. And then we'll just hit on the next one, and then we can move on to any other written in questions. But the next one is, how can I work with my coach to gain some coaching skills? So again, I really think that creating some sort of partnership is really beneficial. If you have some aspirations to move into the coaching space, I really think it would be a good idea to share those aspirations with your management, and perhaps ask the coach that has come into your organization if you can shadow him or her, or work with him or her to observe what they're doing, then maybe take over some of the things that they're doing and maybe facilitate some of those things that he or she was previously doing. Also work with your coach to maybe have some one-on-one mentoring sessions where you meet once a week, and then you have the opportunity to talk about specific things and a plan going forward to develop your skill sets into an Agile coach.